Hello and welcome to today's lecture for CS303 operating systems. So today is chapter number 6, lecture number 4. So once again, welcome to CS303 operating systems, chapter number 6 and lecture number 4. So we are still on the chapter of synchronization. Now we have a good idea about what can go wrong when multiple processes or threads are executing concurrently at the same time and have the potential to modify shared data. So we have seen, unless we have some kind of synchronization between them, bad things can happen, such as getting incorrect values for data, some processes or threads request being overwritten. So clearly, whenever we have multiple processes trying to access and modify shared data, some form of synchronization is needed, right? And the general, so that's how we define the critical section problem, in which we said that for each process there is a part of its code in which it is modifying the shared data, right? So that part of code for a process is its critical section. So what the critical section problem states is, so we have a bunch of processes, each having its own critical section in which it is modifying shared data. So what we say is, at any given point of time, how many processes can be in their critical sections? One and only one at max. Right? So we may have a scenario in which none of them is, but at most we bound it at one. Right? So the solution needs to guarantee mutual exclusion. And we also looked at the bounded weighting and the progress conditions. And based on that, in the last lecture we discussed a very rudimentary simple solution called Peterson's solution to the critical section problem, and that solution was for two processes, right? So we saw how using two shared variables, flag and turn, we were able to solve the critical section problem. So what we will do in today's class is look at something which is more recent, something which is more popular. We will talk about semaphores, okay, and we will discuss semaphores as a solution to the critical section problem. Okay, so we'll define what a semaphore is. We'll see how semaphores can be implemented, and then using semaphores we will solve some classic synchronization problems. Okay, so topic is to discuss semaphores as a solution to the critical section problem. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide number 2, and now we start our discussion on semaphores. So this is a popular solution to the critical section problem, which means that a set or a bunch of processes or threads that want to that are accessing shared data and that want to have some kind of synchronization between them, so that the modifications to shared data are protected, right? So that if one process or thread is writing, the others wait. So then they can all such processes can employ semaphores to solve this critical section problem. So what are the origins of this semaphore? Definition taken from Oxford Dictionary. A semaphore is defined as a system of sending messages by holding the the arms or two flags in certain positions. So you may have seen this kind of mechanism being used in railway stations, where they have a red flag and a green flag, right? So if you have, let's say if you have only one line, one railway line, and then if a train is coming, is using that railway line, then obviously you want to block the other trains from using that line, right? So, or let's say if you have only one platform, right? So you have only one platform, and then bunch of trains are coming. So when one train is coming and it has occupied the platform, then what about the other trains? Well, then a person can stand with a red flag, and then the trains can see that flag from far, and it's a signal to them that the platform is occupied, and they should definitely wait for a green signal, right? So here a red signal, red flag implies a train is occupying the platform for a short while, maybe 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and a green signal implies the platform is free. So the protocol is very simple now. A train, while it is arriving at a railway station, checks the flag. If the flag is green, it parks itself on the platform, and now the flag is changed to red. And any other train that wants to come, but seeing the red, it has to wait. And then eventually, when the original train leaves the platform, the signal is again green. So I'm sure you would have seen this kind of mechanism. It's pretty common in railway stations. So a very similar thing holds in operating systems as well, right? So just like a train, before it's arriving on a platform, it checks the flag. Over here, a process or a thread that needs to enter its critical section checks the value of the semaphore. Okay, and accordingly it either enters the critical section or it has to wait. So how exactly that happens, we'll soon see. Very similar to how the trains operate. So semaphore S for us is simply an integer variable. Okay, it's an integer variable on which only a limited set of operations are allowed. Okay, so one is of course initialization, where you initialize its value. So what kind of values are possible, we'll soon discuss. And besides initialization, two standard atomic operations are allowed on the integer semaphore S. Those are wait and signal. So which means you can wait on S and you can do a signal on S. And what we are saying is, this is important, checking the semaphore value, changing it, and possibly going to sleep are all done as a single atomic action. So these operations are done atomically, which means if a process is doing these operations, it cannot be interrupted by another process. So the operation is whole, it's atomic, it cannot be broken down. So this is essential for a success, for ensuring success to solving the critical section problem. So the three operations allowed: initialization, well, perhaps checking the value, wait and signal. All these operations are atomic in a single action, which means that any process or thread doing these operations does them from start to finish. While they are doing this operation, they cannot be disturbed or preempted. Okay. And the wait operation is to acquire the semaphore resource, and the signal is to release the semaphore resource. So here we see an implementation of wait and S. So wait with S, what we are doing is checking the value of S. While S is equal to 0, we just keep on waiting, just like we did in the Peterson solution. And if S has a non-zero value, then we do S minus minus. And for signal with S, we just do S plus plus. So we'll soon see how these values are used for synchronization. But for now we know S is a semaphore, it's an integer variable on which we can perform wait and signal, both being atomic operations. Okay. Okay, so now I am on slide number 3. So now we will talk about counting semaphores. So once again we said that all modifications to the integer value of the semaphore in wait and signal operations must be executed atomically. Right? All modifications to the integer value of the semaphore S in both variable and signal operations must be executed atomically. So what this means is when one process modifies the semaphore value, no other process can simultaneously modify the same semaphore value. So no interruptions, no preemptions allowed. So now we look at what kind of values semaphores can take. So we can use them in two ways. One option is we use them as what we call binary semaphores. So binary semaphore means that the value allowed is 0 or 1. Okay, only binary values, so only two values allowed, which are 0 or 1. So when we use it like this, we call this as a mutex lock. Binary semaphore is also called a mutex lock. Okay. So what that means is before a process wishes to enter its critical section, it checks the value for the lock, just like that train did. If the lock is available, the process or thread acquires the lock and enters the critical section. Now importantly, if other processes wish to enter the critical sections, they will all see that the lock is acquired and they will have to wait. And once the original process is finished, it's gotten out of its critical section, the lock is released. So similar to how the train operated, if a train comes and sees a red flag, it means sort of the lock is acquired. Particular train is already on the platform, and when the train leaves that platform, then it releases the lock, signal is green, now some other train can enter. Now if you have a set of processes waiting to enter the critical section and the lock is released, then based on your scheduling policy or based on a queue, you can decide who gets to enter the critical section next. So binary semaphore, value 0 and 1 or 1, we use it as a mutex lock. So mutex is just a short form for mutual exclusion, either or, right? So only one at a time in the critical section. Counting semaphores, here the values could be in a range, so they're not confined to be binary. They could be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever value. Okay. So now what we are saying is semaphores can be used to control access to given resource instances. Okay. Right. So let's say you have a certain number of resource instances, right? Resource could be a CPU, it could be a bunch of disks that you have, right? Like that you could have multiple instances of resources. So then when you want to control, you want to do synchronization, you want to control access to those resources, what you can do is you can set the semaphore value as equal to the number of resources. So if you have 4 CPUs, semaphore value can be 4. Now each process that wishes to use a resource, for example a process wishes to use a CPU, performs a wait operation on the semaphore, thereby performing a decrementing operation. When a process releases a resource, it performs a signal operation, thereby performing an incrementing operation. When the semaphore value goes to 0, all instances are in use of that resource, and after that a process that wishes to use a resource will block or wait till the semaphore value is greater than 0, at least one instance is available. So to give you an example of 4 CPU instances, right, so the value of the counting semaphore S is 4, right, and remember the code for wait and signal, right, so wait S, while S is equal to 0, keep waiting in the while loop, otherwise S minus minus, and signal S is S plus plus. So any process now that wishes to enter use the CPU waits on S. So the first process that waits on S, initial value of S is of course 4. So then while S is equal to 0 is false, it acquires a resource and now it does S minus minus. So now S is what? 3. Then second process enters, does S minus S is 2. Third process S minus S is 1. Fourth process S minus minus S is 0. So now 4 processes are holding 4 CPUs. Now if a fifth process comes and wants to use the CPU, when it does a wait on S, the value of S is 0. So inside that while loop it will wait. Until when it will wait? It will wait till one of these 4 processes releases the CPU. So once one of these 4 processes is done, it will execute a signal which will do S plus plus, right? And now, so the first process that is done with the CPU, it does S plus plus. So the value of S is what? Changes from 0 to 1, and now the process that was waiting can now use the CPU, and now S is back to 0, right? So wherever you have multiple resources, you can use semaphores to perform synchronization, right? So if S is a CPU, before acquiring the CPU, you do a wait on S. If S is at least 1, you acquire the CPU, and if S is 0, then you have to wait inside that while loop. You have to block, the process has to block or wait till when? Till at least one process releases the CPU by doing a signal. So the way the way the code of each process works is, do a wait on S, use the resource, and then do a signal on S. Okay. So in this way you can synchronize the usage of resources in your operating system. Okay. I hope it's clear. Okay, now I am on slide 4. And now we look at the binary semaphore. Right, so previously we had the counting semaphore in which the value of the semaphore was, let's say 4, or could be even 8 or whatever. Now we can also use this semaphore as a binary one, and here we use it as a lock, right? Like we did in the train example. So the bottom line is, before entering a critical section, a process or thread checks the value for the lock, or in other words, it checks to see whether the lock is available. If the lock is available, the process or thread acquires a lock and now enters its critical section. Now importantly, if other processes wish to enter the critical sections while the original process is in its critical section, can we allow that? No, we cannot allow that, because we said that only one process can be in its critical section at any point of time. So what all those processes will see is, when they try to acquire the lock, they will see that the lock is taken, it's busy. So they will wait on the value of the lock. Now when will the lock be released? The lock will be released when the original process gets out of its critical section. And then if you have one process waiting on the lock, it will acquire the lock. If you have multiple processes waiting on the lock, then maybe you have a queue of such processes, and according to your some scheduling algorithm, you can give access to them. Right. So if it's first come first serve, then the process that has been waiting for the lock for the longest amount of time gets access to it. Rest all of them wait. So like this, eventually each process gets to enter its critical section, but we have the synchronization or the protection in place. At any point of time, only one process inside its critical section. So what you have is, you have a semaphore mutex, mutual exclusion variable, can have 0 and 1 value, initialize it to 1, and now what each process does is executes this code. Wait on mutex, enter critical section, signal on mutex, remainder section, while true. So each process will have this code. So let's say first process comes, waits on mutex, mutex is 1, available. So it acquires a lock, and no waiting in the while. because the condition in while is while mutex is equal to 0, right? So now it acquires a lock and it does minus minus, so the value of mutex is 0. Now it's in its critical section. Now in the meantime, if any other process comes, it does a wait on mutex, it will see the value of mutex is 0 and it will wait in the while. So importantly, all such processes waiting on the while will not be allowed to enter the critical section. Eventually when the original process gets out of its critical section, it does a signal. Now mutex is back to 1 and then some other process can go in. Right. Of course this will definitely work in a sequential case also. Process 1 enters, waits on mutex, mutex is 0, does critical section, signals mutex, mutex is 1, then process 2 enters. So it will cover both the sequential and the parallel execution case. Okay. So it should be clear now how we can use a lock, right, or a binary variable to control access to the critical section so that only one process is in its critical section at a time. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 5 and as this says, binary semaphores solve the critical section problem. Right. So we were talking about it in the previous slide. So binary semaphores are also known as mutex locks, mutual exclusion locks, locks that can provide mutual exclusion. Right. A process must acquire a lock before entering its critical section and it releases a lock when it exits its critical section. So for each process, this is what the code will look like. Acquire and set lock if available. So first is the entry section. Check the value of lock. If the lock is available, acquire it. If it's not available, wait. Enter the critical section and then release lock and then remainder section. So we discussed that in the previous slide. So for each process, the entry section consists of checking the value of lock and seeing if it's available. Right. If the lock is available, take it and acquire it and enter the critical section. Now the value of the lock or binary semaphore is 0 and now all other processes that wish to enter the critical section will see when they do a test on that, when they do a wait on that, they will see the lock value is 0 and they will have to wait. And then once you are done, release the lock and other processes can use it. So in the next slide, we will see for two processes how this works. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 6 and now we see how we can have synchronization between two processes P1 and P2 using mutex lock, right, semaphore. So initialize the value of mutex variable, mutex lock to 1 and for both processes code is similar. Begin, do a wait on mutex, enter critical section, signal on mutex, end. And both the wait and signal are given. S here is the value of mutex, right, which is binary semaphore 0 or 1. So in case the processes are executing sequentially, let's see if it works. So process P1, let's say, starts, wait on mutex, mutex is 1. So wait on S, wait on 1, while S is 0, this will be false. So S minus minus or S is 0. So now value of mutex or S is 0 and now process P1 is in its critical section. As soon as it gets out, it does a signal on mutex, signal on S, which sets the value of S to 1. Right? Right? So here we only consider the case of two processes. You could have another scenario. P2 starts, waits on mutex, mutex is 1, S is 0, critical section, signal mutex, S is 1. So we have only two processes. Right? Now let's say we have They're executing concurrently. So process P1 comes, does a wait on mutex, acquires the lock, enters its critical section, and now process P2 enters. It does a wait on mutex. It will see S is equal to 0. So it will wait there, and eventually when P1 gets out of its critical section, it will do a signal on mutex. The mutex or S will be 1, and then P2 gets out of the while loop within its wait, and it will do S minus minus, or S is 0. Now P2 has acquired the lock, and now if P1 wants to run, it again has to wait. And eventually when P2 is done, it releases the lock, and if P1 is waiting, it can utilize the lock. So in this way you can see that we can use a simple lock to control the execution of, or to synchronize the execution of these two processes, P1 and P2. So any process that wishes to enter the critical section does a wait on the lock or mutex S. The value is either 0 or 1. If it's 1, it acquires a lock, enters the critical section. The other process now, when it tries to acquire the lock is taken, so it has to wait, in that while loop. Once your original process is done, right, it releases the lock by doing signal S is 1, and then the other process can get in. So in this way, using this binary semaphore or using this mutex, we can perform synchronization of these two processes, P1 and P2. Okay. Right. I hope that is clear how using the lock the synchronization is happening. Okay. So I think rest of it looks good. While S is 0, S minus minus, right, or S is equal to 0. So if the other process comes, it waits on that, doesn't get ahead, and then when the original process signals S is 1, then it gets out. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 7. So now let's do a practice example. So here what we have is we consider two concurrently running processes, right? So there is a probability that both of them may run at the same time concurrently. Now the processes are called P1 and P2, and both of them are very simple processes consisting of only one statement each. So that here we keep the process code simple so that we can focus on the synchronization part. So as far as P1 is concerned, it has one statement called S1. As far as P2 is concerned, it also has one statement called S2. Now our requirement is that S2 will execute only after S1 has completed. So you can see this is sort of a precedence constraint. If you recall in the chapter on CPU scheduling, when we were discussing the multi-processor scheduling algorithm, the input processes were represented in the form of a graph, and we had edges going from one process to the other. And the requirement was that a particular process may start only after it has received the results from all of its parent processes. So this is that kind of a constraint, that S2 executes only after S1, right? So essentially what we are saying is P2 cannot execute till P1 has finished. Okay. So now how do we so obviously this is a synchronization problem. So we have to synchronize the execution of P1 and P2 such that P2 executes only after P1 has executed. So which means that, where is the synchronization necessary? If P2 wants to execute and P1 has not executed yet, then of course P2 has to wait. Right? So if P2 wants to execute but P1 has not executed, then of course P2 has to wait, because that is our condition. So here you can see the synchronization is coming in, right? So now how do we synchronize the execution of these processes so that our requirement is satisfied? So one thing you will note here is, are the two processes sharing any data? No. Right? Previously we looked at examples in which the set of processes or threads share data, but in this case there is no sharing of data. There is only a precedence constraint. So now let's think about it. How can we synchronize their execution using semaphores? Okay. So now we're at the solution, slide 8. Now if you don't want to look at this, you can always pause at the previous slide and then think about it and then look at the solution later. So now what we can do here is we can use a lock, right? So lock would be appropriate because using the lock we can ensure execution of one process over before the other. Okay. So here the trick is, instead of initializing the lock to 1, we initialize the lock to 0. Right. So instead of initializing the lock to 1, we initialize the lock to 0 and we make process P2 wait on that lock. So process P2, before it executes S2, it has to wait on this lock. So which means it cannot, process P2 cannot get to S2 till the lock has been released, and we ensure that the lock is released only once S1 has finished. So you see the codes for P2: wait on sync, which is a shared lock, wait on sync, initial value is 0, and then S2, and for P1 S1 signal on sync. So now if P2 wants to run, remember our condition is S2 cannot execute until S1 has finished execution. So if P2 wants to go first, it waits on the sync, waits on 0, right? And the only way it can get to S2 is when it gets out of that wait. And the only way that can happen is when the value of sync becomes 1. So when will the value of sync become 1? After S1. So once S1 is executed, signal becomes 1, and now P2 can execute S2. So in this way we have done synchronization and ensured that S2 completes execution after S1. Of course, if S2 as such starts after S1, no problem. If P1 runs first, it does S1, it does a signal on sync. Now the value of sync is 1. Now P2 runs, it does a wait. Value of sync is 1, it can immediately do S2. So the solution will work both for both scenarios, if P1 goes first or if P2 goes first. So in this way we can use this lock to solve this precedence constraint problem. Okay, so point we are trying to make is semaphores can be used to solve different kinds of synchronization problems. They are not just limited to synchronization in which you have multiple processes or threads modifying shared data. They can be used for other synchronization problems as well, like this one. Okay, so now I am on slide 9. The title of the slide is Classical Problems of Synchronization. So now that we have a pretty good idea about semaphores and how they can be used to solve basic synchronization problems, Now we use semaphores to solve problems which are a bit more involved. So in that sense, now we will discuss some of the classical synchronization problems and how we can use semaphores to solve them. Okay. So these are quite popular, and in fact any synchronization solution that is proposed is tested on these classical problems to see whether it's that solution is effective or not. Okay, so all of these are quite popular. So which problems are we going to be looking at? First is the bounded buffer problem. So this we've already had some exposure to this. You've got a producer process and a consumer process. Producer produces items and consumer consumes them. So we saw that there was a need to synchronize them, right? Because we had that shared variable count, and we saw that towards the beginning of this chapter we saw that if we don't have synchronization and if we have simultaneously many processes executing, or let's say producer and consumer executing concurrently, then depending on how their instructions interleave with each other, we can get different kinds of values for the shared count variable. So without synchronization we may get incorrect values of the count variable, whereas we have to avoid that, and we show that using semaphores we can do good synchronization for that, and we can ensure correct values for that count variable. So that is a bounded buffer problem. Second is readers writers problem, right? So bunch of readers, bunch of writers, how do we synchronize their access? And then perhaps we look at dining philosophers problem. Okay. So these are the three popular classical synchronization problems we will look at, and we will try to solve these using semaphores. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 10, and now we discuss the solution to the bounded buffer problem, producer consumer problem. So we saw earlier if we do not have synchronization we can get incorrect values of count. So we saw that initially if the value of count is 5, then without synchronization, if the producer and consumer both execute one time, after their execution the value of count can be either 4 or 5 or 6. What is the correct value? It's 5. Right? Scenario 1, producer executes, initialized value of count is 5. So now after producer executes, value of count is 6. Now the consumer executes, value of count is 5. Scenario 2, initialized value of count is 5. If the consumer executes, value of count is 4. Then the producer executes, value of count is 5. So correct value is 5 if both the producer and consumer execute. But without protection, if they execute in concurrently, we could either get 4 or 5 or 6. So clearly what we need to do is we need to protect the access to the count variable. So which is what we'll do here. We will ensure that when one process is modifying the value of count, the other process cannot do so. So each process, whether it's a producer or consumer, will have its own critical section, in which what will they be doing? In which they will be modifying the value of count. Okay, so we need to ensure that at any point of time only one process is in its critical section, either the producer or the consumer, not both. Right? So I hope that is clear why we need that mutual exclusion. So we have a pool of n buffers, each can hold one item, like a circular array perhaps. So maximum number of items that can be put is n. So what are the semaphores that we need? So which will provide the synchronization? Well, one semaphore we need is a lock, mutex lock. Why? Because we have to protect the critical section. We have to protect the modification to the count variable. So if a producer wants to enter its critical section to modify the value of count, it checks the value of a lock. If the lock is available, it acquires a lock and then enters its critical section to change the value of count. Now if the consumer enters, it sees the lock is acquired, So it obviously waits on the lock. When is the lock released? When the producer exits its critical section, when it's done changing the value of count. And now the lock is released, it's available for the consumer and the consumer can acquire it, enter its critical section. In the meantime, if the producer is again ready, it has to wait for the consumer to release the lock. So before entering their critical sections, both the producer and the consumer have to acquire the lock. So this lock will provide mutual exclusion for access to the pool of buffers, buffer pool. So is this the only synchronization we require? Lock for protecting count? Well, no. Because if you think about it, both the producer and the consumer need to wait if certain events occur. When will the producer need to wait? Wait means it has to, it has to stop producing items and has to wait for some event. So in which scenario will the producer have to wait? When the buffer is at its maximum capacity, it's totally full. There are already n items in the buffer. So if the buffer is full, producer waits. Likewise, when does a consumer wait? Consumer waits if the buffer is empty because, well, there is no item it can consume. So for the producer to add an item, there has to be at least one available slot. There can be more than one, but at least one. Right? Empty slot. For the consumer to consume, at least one of the slots should be full. Right? So once again, what we are saying is, for the producer to produce, at least one slot has to be empty. Right? And for the consumer to consume, at least one slot has to be full. Right? Clear? So we have these semaphores, counting semaphores called full and empty. Full will count the number of full buffers, right? Full slots. So initially, what is the value of full? Well, how many buffers are full at the beginning before the producer and consumer have got a chance to execute? How many buffers are full? 0, of course. So full is initialized to 0. And then we have another semaphore called empty, which counts the number of empty buffers. How many buffers are empty at the beginning? All of them are empty, so number of empty buffers is n. So full is initialized to 0, empty is initialized to n. So now the question is, how is the value of full and empty changing when we are producing or consuming an item? So when we are producing an item, what happens to the number of full buffers? It increases by 1. What happens to the number of empty buffers? It reduces by 1, right? So when the producer produces an item, number of full buffers increases by 1, number of empty buffers reduces by 1. What happens for the consumer? Exact opposite. When the consumer executes, number of full buffers reduces by 1 and number of empty buffers increases by 1. Okay. So I hope that is clear. Now with that out of the way, let us discuss the solution. Okay, now I am on slide 11 and now we discuss the solution for producer and consumer. So first thing so again we assume both producer and consumer are running infinitely or for a very long period of time. So first thing producer does is produce an item in next produced. So let's say next produced is a variable where the latest item to be produced is put, right? A variable where the latest produced item is put. So one thing you are seeing here is the wait and signal on mutex. So that part is pretty clear. So the critical section is adding an item to the buffer. So when it adds an item, then it does count plus plus. So all that adding the item is part of the critical section. Adding the item to the buffer, doing count plus plus. That's part of the critical section. So before it can enter its critical section, it does a mutex on wait. So what's the initialized initial value of mutex? It's 1, of course, right? 1 means lock is available, can be acquired. 0 means lock has been taken, it has been acquired. So 1 means lock is available, it can be acquired. 0 means lock is taken, it has been acquired. So wait mutex, if the lock is available, take it, then enter the critical section, add the item to the buffer, do count plus plus, and then signal mutex, release the lock. And likewise we'll have this similar piece of code in the consumer as well. Wait mutex, remove an item from the buffer, do count minus minus, signal mutex. So I think this part is pretty clear, that nothing much to discuss here. Now what about the other wait and empty, wait and signal. So wait mutex, signal mutex is clear. What's happening at wait empty? Right. So once again, what is the variable empty or what does the semaphore empty denote? Counts the number of empty buffers. Right. Counts the number of empty buffers. So initially, what is the value of for empty? It's n. So as long as the value of empty is at least 1, producer can produce, which means that as long as I have at least 1 empty buffer, I can produce. What happens when the value of empty is 0? If the value of empty is 0, which means how many buffers are empty? None, which means all are full. So if number of empty buffers is 0, I have to wait over here, I cannot produce anything, right? I have to wait here. And when will I be able to move ahead as a producer? Only when a consumer executes signal empty, right? Because what's happening on the consumer side, once it's consumed an item, what effect does that consumption have on the value of empty? So once a consumer has executed, how will the value of empty change? The number of empty buffers. Well, obviously that number of empty will increase by 1. It's clear, right? So once a consumer consumes, it will do signal empty, and then if there's any producer waiting at wait empty, it will come out, and then it will start producing. Okay, so if value of empty is 0, all buffers are full, need to wait. And likewise, you can see this is also doing a signal full, which gives you a hint that the consumer will do a wait on full. So because what is full counting? Number of full buffers. When full is equal to 0, right? When full is equal to 0, it means, what does it mean? How many buffers are full? None. None of them are full. Number of full buffers is 0. How many are empty? All are empty, right? So if all are empty, definitely the consumer has to wait. So in a future slide, we'll have both of these next to each other, and then we will look at it. So now I am on slide 12. This is the structure of the consumer process. The wait mutex and signal mutex is exactly the same. So before the consumer also removes an item from the buffer and does count minus minus, it has to acquire a lock, and once it's done, it releases it. So the critical section for the consumer consists of removing an item from the buffer and doing count minus minus. Now when will the consumer wait? Consumer will wait when there's not even one element in the buffer. So which means buffer is totally empty. So which means which of the counting semaphores are 0? Full or empty? So full is 0 or empty is 0. Under which situation will consumer wait? Well, if number of full buffers are 0, it means all are empty. Right? So under wait full it has to wait. If we put wait empty here, then it means it's waiting when number of empty buffers is 0, which means all are full. Well, obviously it doesn't make sense for the consumer to wait if all the buffers are full. So it will do a wait on full. If full is 0, number of full buffers is 0, all are empty, nothing to consume, so need to wait. And then at the end it will do a signal or empty, a signal or empty. So if there is any producer waiting on empty equal to 0, this effect of doing signal empty will increase the value of empty by 1, and then that producer can now continue producing. Okay. So now we will look at both of these together side by side. Okay, so now I am on slide 13. Looks like this is the last slide for today's lecture. So here what we have is, we have got both the producer and the consumer side by side. Yeah. So what is the synchronization that we need? Well, both the producer and consumer, before they enter the critical section, so they'll be doing different things. In the critical section, the producer will add an item and increase the value of count by 1, count plus plus. The consumer will remove an item and decrease the value of count, count minus minus. So what we are saying is, before they either the producer or the consumer enters its critical section, so it has to acquire a lock. So therefore wait mutex, enter critical section and signal mutex. So I think this part should be clear. Using mutex as a lock, we can ensure that the access to the critical section is protected. Only one can access at a time. Mutual exclusion is ensured. The other kind of synchronization we want is, if the buffer is empty, we want the consumer to wait till at least one item is added, and if the buffer is full, we want the producer to wait, since there are no more free slots. So for that we use two counting semaphores, empty and full. Full counting the number of full buffers, full slots, empty counting the number of empty slots. Initially value of full is 0, nothing has been added, and initially value of empty is n, right? So full is 0 implies empty is n, right? Full is 0 implies empty is n. Then when full is 1, empty is n minus 1. So like that it goes. So now what we are saying is, for the producer it has to wait when the buffer is full. So it has to wait when the buffer is full. So when one of these semaphores, their value is 0, it has to wait. So producer has to wait on a full buffer, which means when the value of one of these, full or empty, is 0, it has to wait. So does the producer have to wait when full is 0? Full is 0 implies all are empty. Well, no, it does not have to wait. Does the producer have to wait when empty is 0? Empty 0 means full is n, so yes. So producer waits on a 0 value of empty. And when will it get out of this waiting? When a consumer does a signal empty. Because what's happening is, once a consumer has consumed an item, what happens to the value of empty? So after consumption of an item, the value of empty increases by 1. We have one more empty buffer. So after consumption, the producer will do a signal on empty. And if there is any waiting producer on wait empty, its waiting will stop, and now it can go ahead and try to acquire the lock for entering the critical section. Right. Likewise, when will the consumer wait? So will it wait when value of full is 0, or will it wait when value of empty is 0? So for consumer, if empty is 0, which implies full is n, right? Empty is 0, Number of empty slots is 0, which implies all are full. Full is n. So will the consumer wait when all items are full? Of course not, because it can consume. So will the consumer wait when full is 0? Full is 0 means all are empty. Yes, it will. So both the producer and consumer have to wait when one of these semaphores is its value is 0. So therefore producer waits on empty, consumer waits on full. So if full is 0 means empty is n, all are empty. Right? So then eventually what will happen is one of the producers will produce an item. And what is the effect of producing an item on the value of full? Well, it will increase by 1, and then this consumer which was waiting on full stops its waiting and tries to enter the critical section by acquiring the lock. Okay. So producer waits on empty to be relieved of its waiting by a signal empty, and consumer waits on full to be relieved of its waiting by a signal full. So you can see a very elegant solution. Both the producer and consumer solutions are sort of mirror images of each other. Right. So I hope that is clear. So this is the solution to the producer consumer problem using semaphores. So will this work for sequential? First, let's say if a producer starts execution, right? What are the initial values? Initial value for mutex is 1, initial value for empty is n, initial value of full is 0. So producer is executing, is doing a wait on empty. So empty is n, so it can definitely enter. It gets passed, it does not have to wait on empty. Acquires a lock, adds item to the buffer, releases a lock, does a signal on full. So now the value of full is 1, value of empty is n minus 1. So now the consumer can execute, waits on full, value of full is 1, so there is one item, it can consume it. And then it does a signal on empty, again the value of empty goes back to n. Right, so we can easily see a producer can run from start to finish, and then a consumer can run from start to finish. What about the reverse? Consumer runs from start to finish and then producer runs from start to finish. Will it work? So let's see, consumer is the first to run, wait on full, initial value of full is 0. So it has to wait right there. So if it is a consumer that's running first, it stops at wait full. Then eventually a producer will come and it will do a wait on empty. Empty is n. It will go through, it will acquire the lock, it will add an item, it will do signal full. Now value of full is 1, and that consumer which was waiting initially will be able to consume the item. So you can see whatever is your execution sequence, mutual exclusion will be preserved by this solution. Producer can run from start to finish, then a consumer can run. Consumer cannot be the first one to run. It has to wait for the producer to put at least one item there. Okay. So I hope it's clear. Please study this.